Mm. We're live. Let's go. Right. Should we go straight into it?
Yeah.
All right. Welcome to the Seattle Overload podcast. It is the film review of the week where Griffin and I will dive into what went wrong, and there's a bit more of what went wrong and what went right against the Las Vegas Raiders. Griffin is, if you're watching on the YouTube, holding up a drawing of what looks like a very nasty two-back run, which we'll get into that. But Griff, overall, the tape, how much cope was there in the tape?
Um, it was their first bad defensive game where it felt like the scheme was sound. And on the broadcast, I thought I saw it felt like there was a prevalence of like, oh, why are they reverting to stuff that they don't do well in against certain things? And there really wasn't upon review. They were actually pretty careful with it. Maddie, you talked about before we went live, they actually had a lot more tools to their disposal that they use to shore up the issues presented by some of their main things, like the change-up calls and supplementary calls off of the same looks. And the execution just fell apart, especially in the second half. Thought they, for the most part, they held up okay in the first half, with the problem areas being tricky passing combinations on the rookies predominantly. In the second half, kind of everybody fell apart. Although in the first half, we also had Diggs with some miscues, with some great plays too, um,
Yeah,
but with some miscues.
sort of. I mean, obviously, Diggs' two interceptions kind of cover up the first half, but there was a lot of still in the first half. There was weird like execution errors and them just executing better as well. But yeah, I'm encouraged by the defense. They actually, they were moving the line a bit. They were fire zoning. They were doing things to solve like the issues they'd had in the fronts, like the C gap issue. Not just putting the
Right.
5 technique in the bare front in the C gap, but also moving the line to close the C gap.
And it worked when they did it.
Right, and then also playing like rotating down into middle field close to like encourage the box to be run on, and then closing that box, blitzing in the nickel 4 down looks to again alleviate stress, prevent the offense, because if you just sit in that one front each time, the offense is going to have easy blocks and they'll block it more assuredly each time, and they'll be very confident and they'll just fit it up easier and easier. So you have to change the picture, and that's what Seattle did. And not only were they changing the picture, but they were making it easier for their guys up front to fit the run. So that was big. So there are some positives, and I felt this is one of the first games actually that I felt they had a lot of like variety in the game plan, and that Clint hurt, and you could see sort of where it was going. It wasn't as like basic. I think they've established what they want to be, and they started leaning into some more variety. And obviously they've had a bye week to look at their tendencies, look at what they were good at, and I think that showed up. It's just unfortunate that they got suckered in the big moments. Like the run defense overall was pretty good. Like they got run on when they should have done. Like when they they posed a light box, but then
They, in the first half, especially when they were in, when previously we called a problem front, especially against like 21 personnel slash 12 personnel, or like McDaniels likes to blur the lines there with motion, putting a fullback in the backfield. They handled a large volume of those runs, like a high rate of those runs, really well. And like the linebackers especially were really on top of it. Like they knew what they were being tasked with. And that was encouraging. And I think the linebackers really, with the exception of that final play, I think for the most part, like they were difference makers and toward the positive. Like they were doing their job with a lot of this. Um, when they had problems, it wasn't schematic. It was really like an individual player up front, just absolutely falling apart. And the names that come to mind predominantly were Quentin Jefferson and LJ Collier. But Jefferson probably had the worst game of his football career. I've never seen him play that poorly against the run, and he's not a dominant run defender. But he can be fine. He can be serviceable, right? And he was playing like Robert Nkemdiche did last year and like LJ Collier did last year. Now, LJ himself also didn't play that great this game. He didn't have that many snaps to show how poorly he played, maybe. But, like with a larger sample. But I mean, Jefferson might single handedly be responsible for like 100 yards almost this game. Like linebackers can't do anything when you have your defensive tackle in your lap 5 yards downfield and you have to fit one of the gaps outside of him. So it was horrendous. And then Puna Ford, I was hard on him in the game recap. I thought he actually played pretty well, but he had 2 plays that were just like really bad. Like he kind of fell apart toward the end. Al Woods didn't have a dominant game, but he was fine. But again, he didn't have a dominant game. So that's another piece to this puzzle of, well, why was it so bad when one of your best players, instead of being dominant, who's usually dominant, is merely fine in conjunction with all the other things around him. It's another reason why it all comes down. But more positively, I mean, Brooks has been defending the run well this year, especially controlling for expectation of what the front and the call is, the box count and everything. It was really cool to see Cody Barton play with like full confidence all game long. I really think he only had like 2 reps where you can nitpick maybe. I mean, on the front side of the play, on the back side of the play, 2 high, 1 high, knowing what he needed to key, how he needed to play, because 2 high, 1 high, the what you ask of the linebacker can change, right? But the techniques and stuff. He just pretty much was what they needed him to be. And not only was that crucial for this game, we can look toward the future with it, is that they needed to play base as much as they did this game and needed to play the version of nickel where he's on the field this game so that they could be versatile with their pass coverage, because they like getting 2x2 formations, the Raiders do, and they like getting seams to the weak side with their tight end. Now, if they had Waller this game, it could have been really bad. That's kind of what makes the Raiders exciting if they keep it together for this offseason when they get Waller in their injunction with Devontae Adams and Derek Carr, provided they keep Carr and all the rest. But they needed Barton out there, like we saw with that interception play. Great play. It might even have been quarters to that side. On live, I thought it was cover 2, but it might have been quarters.
I think it was just pure cover 4. I think it was
Yeah.
cover 4 both sides, and they did run a fair share of just straight up cover 4 in this game, along with their blend of cover 2, cover 4 stuff.
So it's interesting then on that note that they have a coverage tool where they let the overhang carry a seam then.
Right. Yeah, good point.
So that's pretty interesting. But so they wanted Barton out there because if you're playing 5-1-5 nickel, you're not going to ask Uchenna Nwosu, or even, I mean, you probably could ask Darrell Taylor to do it because he's so athletic. But generally speaking, you're not going to ask a pseudo defensive lineman to carry seams. So that's why smart offensive minds like McDaniels, who maybe isn't a great head coach, but he's a smart offensive mind. He wants to especially it's the Patriots fashion, right? They want to dictate formation and personnel so that they can get matchups. They can get a free seam, and it's all on the safety and quarters. In this case,
and by the way, McDaniels called a great game, which we'll get to. But
yeah, I thought he called a great game, and that's kind of why I was excited by what they did in the first half, especially at least in intention, because they were playing that balancing act between, can we have flexible coverage to match what they're trying to do to us and still stay sound, or at least even if you're not sound, give yourself the best chance to be effective against the run. And like on a macro level, like it was all working in theory, but it's just leakiness here, leakiness there, and then it all falls apart. A missed tackle, it's like, well, it doesn't matter if your theory is great. It doesn't matter if everyone's being assignment correct. Execution-wise, you got to make a tackle, right? But moving forward, the fact that Cody Barton can not just survive but thrive against the run in these circumstances makes them feel more confident to continue to be as flexible as they were in the past game. Because like that play he made that sparked Diggs' interception was a great play, and the fact that he can just turn and run with those routes, like he showed in the Chargers game, like the Chargers are a little similar, although they do it from pass-heavy formations. They still like to manipulate you. And Clint Hurts' reaction to that was our solution is going to be Cody Barton to this structural problem the Chargers present. The solution to the structural problem McDaniels presents, as looking at the guys they have available to them in balance with the other things they have to take, note of, is Cody Barton. So the fact that they have him in coverage and he's playing that way against the run is one thing to take from this game. I think that is encouraging.
Yeah, agreed. And he's earned praise this week from Clint Hurt and Pete Carroll, so they're both seeing what we're seeing. And he actually spoke as well about how he has been playing more aggressive, and it was like a emphasis coming out of the bye week for him to sort of start taking his shots. And I think now they're sort of understanding the system, and generally, other than the big plays, which we'll get to, but generally I felt there was a bit more cohesion up front. Now there were just weird moments, like, I mean, we've dealt with one of the issues. The Quandre Diggs, he was matched up on the running back in the flat. It's 3rd and 5, so he's sort of playing at the sticks. He gets done down the sideline, gives up the wheel route touchdown. Seattle running their bonus fire zone, so it's basically just cover 3. That's unfortunate. And then there's weird stuff like, there's a play where Kobe Bryant blitzes, but the D-line doesn't seem to get the call, and so they end up with like 3 guys in the same gap. There's little bust between, like, someone probably should have picked 3 up and no one did. Like, I just don't know how this keeps happening, but then maybe it's just, they've added a bit more to the game plan this week. Maybe they're still sort of getting comfortable with that. And interestingly, Clint Hurt, he highlighted the youthfulness of the secondary, the youthfulness in general of the defense.
Mm-hmm.
But he went towards the fact that, like, they need to sort of reset after they have a bad play, and they sort of get into a rut where, like, if they have a bad play or a bad drive, they can't really claw their way back from it. And I mean, that's an interesting perspective from him. But yeah, this game, it became endemic, like the little errors on different plays, where I think obviously, McDaniels, he was imposing stress. He'd watched like they tried that Barton interception was a play that Tampa Bay had tried to run, and I think got open, and this was the same deal, but obviously Barton played it well. Seattle was ready for it. But like, he tested them on that, like, jet motion into like the fast 3 to break their cover 3 rules, which it did again. Like, although Seattle was able to rally to it, so it wasn't terrible. But like, he'd studied what was beating Seattle, and he called stuff. He spent like a whole drive spamming 4 strong with Devontae Adams as the backside receiver, and really worked the Seattle's middle field open coverage rules, and who was going to take 3 up, and were you going to leave Adams one-on-one on the backside, or are you going to double him and leave 3 up open? And then, okay, you're now playing more of like a man-like structure. Well, now I'll start rub routing and getting into the flat and causing dodgy angles and stuff. Now, yeah, I said we've dealt with one of Diggs's errors. The other one, I think, him and Brooks weren't on the same page for that corner route touchdown. We spoke about that in our live reaction, but I mean, obviously Brooks expected help. Diggs was playing Adams. They didn't communicate well enough. That shouldn't happen. Now, again, it's kind of encouraging that these are mistakes. They're not like getting flat out beat, but hopefully they correct them. Anyway, you were saying.
Well, I was going to just say, like, quarters in the red zone can get really funky, especially in the short red zone.
Right.
Because
and they had a fast 3.
They had a fast 3, and because the quarter safety is almost playing like, if you don't get verticals or like dig routes, you get slants, right? So you want to help your corner or whoever is matched up inside on the slot receiver. You kind of the safety wants to give help, but then to the trip side, if the Mike is also matching the 3, he's thinking, I'm going to build a fence all the way toward the end of the end zone.
It was a good beater again.
It's a good beater. So if you get something, outbreaking, it's not. If you think about the same play call, like a double China concept in the middle of the field, you would never have, if a Mike has all of three, you would never expect that Mike to then to take the route all the way to the sideline. Like it never ends up playing out that way. So by virtue of the fact of you being on a shorter field and that safety might be coming down more downhill on a slant, whatever you get there, that it's just the same principle applies. You're the Mike with inside leverage, then pushing all the way to the sideline. He's at a disadvantage on that route. So there would need to be help there, but then you also understand why Diggs is nailing down. So in effect, like you said, it's a good beater. It's something you call, it's something you see against red 4, they call it red zone cover 4. So that one's just tough. And yeah, like the first play, the first touchdown Diggs gave up, like you said, he's coming from depth to come down on a flat route. It's really awkward to come downhill, pivot 180, and then go back toward the end zone. Like that's tough. And I don't know if that was a designed wheel route or not. I think the running back kind of improvised, and Carr just saw it. But when one of your best players, Quandre Diggs, has a little bit of a rough game in those areas, it's like, well, maybe it's just not your day, however you want to frame it. Now, the interceptions he made were fantastic plays. Like we should be raving about those plays. In fact, like on the first one, it was pocket play action, and it was like Y cross, I think, from under center, and Diggs squeezes, or he not squeezes, he nails down on the cross because he eliminates all other threats. He knows that nothing is coming.
And it was
into the
Devontae
post.
Adams running it.
And it's Devontae Adams. So Diggs likes to be aggressive on teams that have a tendency to attack the intermediate middle of the field, like Tennessee last year. They run a bunch of drift, right? Or play action Diggs. And Diggs was his normal depth was changing that game. He was playing more shallow. He's playing tighter. So he knows what teams do. So he earned that interception. That's film study and execution, and on the field smarts there. On the second one, yeah, Cody made a great play, but like he read that all the way. And he came to it. Also, I think Brooks also contributed to the tip as well, because he's the middle hook defender, and he sees given that it's quarters across the board, the Mike goes strong. So Brooks continues to like zone drop, but then he melts weak with the number 3 with the running back, and he ends up like giving the defense layers. So there's like a line of defenders, and he is able to, he almost tips the ball himself, but outstretched, Carr's having to throw over 2 defenders. Now Carr will do that no problem, but it still affects the throw. And maybe that affected the velocity on the throw to put just a touch more arc on it, helping Cody. But it was just good team defense everywhere, and Diggs is all over it, coming from the other hash, right? So, I mean, in a lot of these instances, especially the vets came to play with like concept recognition. But then like there was a 3rd and 2 early in the game where like Bryant gives up something to the flat where it's called a 2-3 push. So you get a fast 3. He has to fall off 2. And then as 3 crosses face, he has to stay leveraged with it and go get him. And he's just late to it. Like he just isn't cognizant of that's what's happening. So that's rough. There's the 3rd and 4.
And again, that's what Hurt is saying, when there's young players out there. And I think we are starting to see a few more like growing pains every now and again.
And then there was the other 3rd and 4 combination of Tariq Woolen and Josh Jones gave up that corner route early in the game. And, short yardage is tough when you're a cloud corner. You want to play, I mean, generally normal down and distance, you want to play top down, defend the deepest route first, right? But he has a smash route, so a corner on top of him and a hitch underneath him, or a flat route underneath him. And granted that it's short yardage on 3rd down, he feels moved to squeeze the flat route a little bit more because he wants to tackle it and not let them convert. But then that means you could give up the corner out, and Josh Jones is not explosive enough, I suppose, to contest, but it's a hard route to contest generally. So it's just a tough spot for them to be in. So yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious to know. Yeah.
Well, the big question people have, I think, is what actually happened on the 86-yard touchdown run.
Yeah.
So They gave up a toss run where earlier in the game where it was run to the weak side and they were spinning into like a 2 deep look after disguising. And, that was an unfortunate one where the tackling just sucked. And they did have some poor tackling in space in this game. That was one of those where it's a good play call, but you should make the tackle for they had it at like 5 or so yards because they still had cornerback force out there. But that was tackling. Now, the 86 yards game winner for Josh Jacobs, that was tackling, but before that, they just didn't fit it up right. So Griffin's kind of drawn it up here. And essentially, it was quite clever from the Raiders because they'd been running a lot of wide stretch. So the fullbacks would be going wider and the running back would be going wider. And Seattle kind of got a bit lucky against that. Like the fullback got a bit lost going wide. Seattle was able to run it out to the sideline when they were in the 2 deep look. And they were able to get like pretty good stops. Along with some of the plays, they just straight up won. Now, interestingly on this play, the nose tackle, and I think because Seattle was technically, they may have been running something called luggage, where they don't technically, it's not technically a bear. It wouldn't be the same. Basically, the nose tackle shades, and they shade the coverage to the threat, which is Devontae Adams. So it enables them to play a cloud more often to Devontae Adams than the other receiver. So it's not always going to be quarter half. However, in this look where the big 86-yard game-winning touchdown run happens, Seattle's in quarter half. So it's exactly the same as the tight wheel 6 stuff we spoke about.
Right.
And as Griffin has drawn up here, the Raiders ran ISO. Now, that was a problem for Seattle because the way in which that was blocked up, Cody Barton, he is correct in falling into his A-gap, but the way Seattle's fitting it. If you look at drawings of Fangio's Eagle 6, which is the same looking front, that linebacker fits the A-gap because the nose tackle shaded into the other A-gap. And the way that they blocked it was the center and the guard doubled the nose tackle and then looked to work up to Barton. The cutback is still a threat. Barton has to play it, and the running back's path is tight. So but Barton still has to play it. Now, the front side kind of deal, which was going on, is Brooks took on the fullback and he spilled the football. Because the way Seattle fits this is they have Barton as the backside kind of lever player, but he has a gap. Then they have Brooks, who he has technically the C gap, but he's more like a spill run through player. And then the outside help is supposed to be Quandre Diggs, fitting kind of the C gap also. But it's more he's just the front side turn back player. He's the outside help.
That's where geometry gets you.
That's where geometry gets you, but that's how Seattle has done it in the past. It's how Mr. Bo Pelini, he did it, and obviously he's been influenced by Pete Carroll over the years. A big part of his thing is sort of constantly saying that a too high safety is the front side lever player or the backside lever player. Anyway, so what happened was Brooks spilled it, and he took it on pretty thick. And interestingly, Pete Carroll wasn't talking about that play in particular, but he was just talking about Brooks. And he said, hold on, what did he say? Oh, yeah, he said linebackers get in trouble when they get, because linebackers, when they get in trouble, they get out of position. And sometimes, he's such an aggressive player. Pete said about Brooks. Now, he didn't mention that play, but I think that was the play in his mind because Brooks was so aggressive. He smashed downhill on it. He was saying about how Brooks still has a bit to learn. And I think it is sort of like, his aggression sometimes does get him in bad spots, but he still spilled the football. It was just a bit wide, a bit thick, and it didn't fully do it. Now
it did hit inside him, so he ends up losing the block on the fullback.
Yeah, he got kicked out. Yeah. So he didn't spill it.
But I think, sorry, go ahead and finish your thought.
Well, yeah.
If you had a thought.
Yeah, so basically then Clint Hurtt, interestingly, he said that having a solid fit with the outside backer and the corner was the important part. And then he said, obviously, the the two high safety defense, the ball should never go for 86 yards because the two high safeties should come up and one of them should make the tackle.
Right.
Which was Josh Jones, who took a terrible angle. But you were saying about Brooks.
Yeah. Well, so I think first we start with, well, like you have already started with, when this you've got 7 blockers, so 8 gaps, and then initially in the box you have 7 defenders. So when you're outnumbered in the box, you then have to make a decision. Either you are trying to fit the run with only 7 primary run fitters against 8 gaps, so that means someone has to 2 gap, or the defensive lineman 1 gap, and then the linebackers have to play a 2 gap technique where they would have to like flow with or track and stack the flow and then fall back if necessary. Like they're just basically both, the two of them are handling 3 gaps basically. Or you can pretend like time and space and numbers and arithmetic doesn't exist, and you just pretend like this quarter safety right here, he's a primary run fitter. So if there's lead action toward the Y tight end, like you were saying, Maddie, that you just pretend like he's in the box the whole time, and he would take on the front side shoulder of a fullback, on paper. In theory, Brooks the inside shoulder, and then Barton right there. So you're pretending like you're fitting the run from too high while you're playing gapped out, 1 gap principles, meaning you've got 8 defenders for 8 gaps or 7 defenders for 7 gaps, so on and so forth. In this instance, because Diggs gets picked off, like you were saying, the corner, he would need to fold in or replace, and he would be right there to make the tackle, but he doesn't. He
went outside. Yeah,
he stays tucked outside with Nwosu, and now they've got 2 extra defenders. But
yeah, I think Nwosu should have the way that all played out and the communication they had pre-snap. I think Nwosu should have just got an inside move in there.
And which he's done a lot of this year too.
Does tons of, yeah.
I think the problem though is that they were, like you were saying, they were expecting some toss or zone lead, zone stretch. So he's thinking, I need to just set a hard edge.
And they'd had a lot of that. This is the first time they saw an ISO run out of this look. They had ISO from a fake 20 personnel. Technically, it would have been 11, but they had it from that, and Seattle fit it brilliantly because they had lever cover 3 kind of look in there.
Right.
This though they had not seen, and I think they just got.
One last thing though I want to say though, because I think what comes down to Brooks playing this, getting caught and playing the block not well. He doesn't play it wrong per se. He doesn't play it well is really, I think, the operative term here, is that because they're trying to play gapped out from too high, you often have the way you engage a blocker from the second level, you take it on more thick, so to speak. So you try to get more square down the middle and then work to the leverage that you need to, as opposed to
something hurt
shouldering the guy.
well, by the way.
Yeah. So like they have plenty of examples this game where they're gapped out, or Brooks is the front side lever defender, even if they're too high against stretch. So he can play more aggressively and like shoulder rip guys or speed rip guys. And he was thumping guys doing that. And he had no problem getting the proper leverage, because this came more downhill at him. And he's the spill defender in this case. He's trying to take it on thick so that you can buy time for the safety coming from depth to come down and play. Even though you're playing gapped out, he doesn't get to play as aggressively as he normally would. And I think he also was thinking, because he gets wide at first. He gets wider than he needs to. I think he's also thinking in his mind some sort of stretch play or toss play.
Yeah.
So he gets too wide and he gets out of position, and then goes, now I got to play my technique. So he kind of just shoulders him through the middle as opposed to the guy's inside half. And then he just gets his feet messed up. And then the tackle, the fullback doesn't even block him per se. He just turns, which effectively blocks him because it's a game of leverage. But he doesn't like move Brooks's body per se. And that's just the angles and the way he takes it on and the mindset of, it messes him up. And ISO really was a great change up to the lead and toss plays they were running, right? Or the zone lead stuff. I think all in all, though, the issues they had in the run game, as far as like how do you solve it other than like individual players up front play better like they have been playing prior to this point. Maddie, you said this. I think that they keep the same structure, the same schematic identity and all the beats and everything, but they just spin down into cover 3 from those looks slightly more often, as often as they feel like they need to not just get the numbers right, but then let individual players then play faster. Because again, you're allowed to play more aggressive when you're gapped out versus when you're out gapped, regardless if you're trying to fit it gapped out or out gapped. So
Right.
I don't know.
And you know what? Like, there's those 2 big runs. And then, as Cody Barton said, if you take them out, which obviously you can't play games like this every week, but if you take them out, the run defense is okay from an average perspective. Like, they did fine. It's just, and yeah, it's just bad execution. And I mean, hopefully it finally fixes itself. It's a bit crazy how it seems to happen every time. The other problem they had was they got on third down. Like they just got on third down, and the balance of the Raiders offense didn't help. Like there was a lot of kind of, 3rd and 6 and under, which is like that cutoff point for, well, it's sort of manageable, right? And I'm not sure what their cutoff point is exactly, but they can still
they have more
run it a bit.
They have more things up their sleeve on third down that they can trot out when they think that there's a mismatch problem.
Yeah. Seattle kind of got worked on third down in this game. So
yeah. So it's really disappointing because the last time they faced a team that has Devontae Adams, when not a whole lot of talent surrounding him, in this case due to injury, was of course the Packers game last year, and their game plan was really solid. Again, especially their third down game plan. But I suppose we're going to see more things to give individual defenders more help in the future. I don't know if that means like more straight 2-man.
I thought they did a fair bit of that though. Well, not 2-man, but like I felt they did like a lot of. I don't really know what more they could have done. They just Carr moved around the pocket well.
I think we
they
could
didn't
see
have
more.
Much rush.
I think we could see more cover 1 robber.
Yeah, there was like 2 snaps of that. Coverage. There was like a bracket on Adams once, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But also just to get like when it takes the younger guys out of situations where it gets complicated, because in cover 1, I just have my guy, and then also like we've said, they can have issues, or Kobe more so one-on-one, because it's so hard in the slot, especially for a rookie. That's where you can play. I think you middle rotate the safety more. I don't know. We'll see.
For me though, this was like overall, like it's a good game for them in the future, in that this was important for figuring out, their schematic buckets. Like we need to do a bit more of this. We need to do a bit more of that. Your min-maxing or your favorite phrases, but the addition of, well, not the addition, but the added fire zones and line movements and like tools to alleviate stress was there. They just had 2 kind of nightmare things fitting the run, and then I mean the passing stuff. McDaniels just called a heck of a game. Carr played great, and Seattle just couldn't quite get stuff going in the pass rush. I don't know. I mean, if they make the playoffs, that will be the sort of game that this game could happen again from they can't get off the field in third down if a team plays imbalanced. But they're just lacking like a good edge rusher opposite Nwosu, really, which is what we said live. Like that's going to hurt them. Like Taylor needs to warm up, or it's not going to happen. So
right. I agree. That was the other element of this game, pass rush. And when the pass rush rule was okay, like had good moments, Carr just mitigated it. I mean, he was awesome in the pocket, and he was awesome in the pocket against the Broncos the previous week too.
I should say Mike Jackson actually played really well in his reps against Adams.
Nice.
And Tariq Woolen was kind of not thrown out at all, which it'll be interesting to see if that's a trend or not. But the one play that I have him being thrown out other than overtime was he like anticipated a Matt Collins dig route before it even broke across, which is like really special. He undercut the heck out of it in cover 3 technique. So he's doing things. So
That's
that's
good.
cool. That's great news. They just need a bit more pop up front. Anyway, right. So
Off.
Griff, offense, and honestly, it's almost easy to get comfortable with how good some of Geno Smith's throws are. But in this game, he
Yeah.
had like some crazy throws, like ridiculous throws. Like, it's easy to say. It's a bit of a, I'm not sure it's true, but
They
if it was Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, it would be on Sports Center. Like he's throwing over hook linebackers. Like he's like
throwing up the seam.
effortlessly hitting the seam. He's coming backside and rifling into intermediate windows. Like he's making some crazy good throws, which I mean, good for him.
He's getting the money's worth out of the pocket too, even after like previous plays where everyone got beat. Like he's not giving up on them, the protection, like just almost for the sake of the exercise. Like work the pocket as though you're going to have a pocket every time. Like that's his MO. He hit down the sideline 3 perfect balls. One was interfered with. It was well defended. I wouldn't have called interference unless I missed something. But it was still like perfect location. It's really cool that, yeah, no, I agree. Like I didn't even bat an eye at some of it. I'm just like used to it now. Like it's just a thing now. Like I'm not
You're
like every
spoiled.
time I'm like, oh wow, he keeps doing it. It's not a fluke. Like this is Geno now. And he wasn't perfect. He had some weird misfires toward the end of the game on those zippy balls to Tyler
Yeah,
Lockett.
they're a bit worrying to me because obviously, we would like him to finish or to win a close one. Now he has done that, but
Well, he
just
put
to
together. He did give him a go-ahead lead though late, and the
he did.
defense
But
fell
it's just
apart.
like, yeah. And I think he started the game a bit angsty because he was getting like watching this back, the pocket was getting moved. Like
They were not winning at all, and
they
that
were
was
bringing
actually
some pass rush.
only Damian Lewis was the only person holding up.
Right.
All the other 4 were getting beat in different ways too.
Which
Um,
then raises a question like, I don't know why they didn't chip release the back more. And, because they've done that in the past. Like they've used more 7-man pro, 6-man
yeah.
pro. But this game, it felt that was lacking a bit, which is kind of wild when they are struggling so much up front. And, Gino is having to make stuff work. And also, the Raiders corners, like they were not covering Metcalf and Lockett deep down the field. Like Gino just needed a bit more time to access some deep stuff. Like there's plays where deep stuff looked to be coming open, but he couldn't quite get
Well,
there in time because they just didn't have the time in the pocket.
the
Which I mean, 5-man pass pro is difficult anyway.
the prevalence of empty even,
Right.
where like the defense knows you're in 5-man pro, and they
Well,
motion out.
and like I get empty, but
Yeah, and so but then Gino was good in empty though too.
he
I mean, some
is.
of his best plays were in empty
Yeah.
this game.
I just felt they
So
left meat on the bone in like the downfield passing game, and I felt they could
agreed,
have made their protection easier. Like
agreed. Now on that note though, it's cool that they achieved what they wanted to achieve downfield look wise and stuff. Because granted, they did hit some fade balls.
they did.
They used a lot of the full house pistol looks or pony personnel, right? And getting that Raider Graham defense, Patrick Graham's defense, um, which has troubled Seattle before. They were able to get the clear one-on-ones outside, even when they were in too high. So that was cool that they were able to manufacture that. That they used 12 personnel to great effect. Now, I think their game plan for helping the protection in this game was the prevalence of empty, or I'm sorry, the prevalence of quick game. Sorry, and Gino was able to access the second level in quick game and hit the first level as well, which is what quick
Yep.
game's meant for. So I mean, they scored 27 points. They were able to move the ball. They scored 27 points with 2 turnovers. So with the fumble and the interception. So like this, I thought all in all the offense had a good day for the most part in terms of being able to move the ball, right?
Am I missing something? I thought they scored 34 points.
Oh, did they score 34? Yeah, it was 34-40.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They scored 34 points, and Gino didn't have his best game, but he had a good game, and the protection was getting eaten half the time.
And the other thing which didn't help Griff was the run game. Now, I'd be
The
interested
run,
in your
oh man,
assessment.
well,
I don't think there's one answer. I think it's a combination of factors. Obviously, it's not like a black and white thing. But interesting. Pete brought up on the radio that they had a power call that for a second looked a little cloudy, and then Ken stuttered his feet. He said he just didn't see it, which I then saw that play and was like, oh, that's interesting. Pete highlights this because it is one of those where if Ken just hits it, it goes
yeah,
for a score. But it's one of those where if you're rapidly fast forwarding through the film, you might be like, "Oh, just stuff run." But the lane was
yeah,
there, and I think I don't know. What's your assessment of Walker first up, Griff?
yeah. I mean, he has problems with reading plays out, on the fly.
Yeah, yeah,
It's sometimes he reads it too well to a fault, and he ends up dancing in the pocket more, or not in the pocket, dancing behind the line of scrimmage with extra steps because he'll see, just a flash of the other team's jersey in the gap and think, oh, that gap's canceled. But then sometimes he'll want to work back to that gap, so he'll press to the other
yeah,
side. But
yes.
the
He's
way he
sort of weave.
presses is so over dramatic, though.
Yeah,
It's like
he's
do a
weaving
subtle, like instead of pressing backside, press the butt of your lineman and then bounce it.
because
But
it's
he
so over
just,
dramatic. He runs the space out.
yeah,
It's almost heavy handed. There's no subtlety to it. He's
yeah.
sort of bashing the keys.
Now, so Nate Tice, because he loved Ken Walker watching him in college, he described him as controlled chaos. And
Hmm.
I think he's always going to be chaotic, but it will work with more experience. So he just
Right.
needs to learn NFL game, NFL speed, and everything, what he can and can't do. And his style will translate. I mean, obviously,
Because
it already has to
this was going on in the games where he had big rushing totals as
right.
well. It just so happened that actually ended up setting up defenders later down the line. And some of it worked a bit better. And
Yeah,
I do think one thing is teams are really, really telling that backside edge defender, squeeze down the line because he's going to cut back to you, and he will do the heavy-handed thing. See that guy there, and then he'll try and run back into the lane he's left, which was there,
yeah,
and it's gone now. It's the NFL
yeah.
can't do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he needs to look at some propositions where he knows he's only getting 3 to 5 yards depending on how he pushes the pile and just to kind of accept it, like just get north.
Right,
But you don't
because
want to
then they'll
beat that
start
into him
hitting.
too much
No, no,
because it's a delicate balance. Now the easiest way to solve this is just to have better blocking too,
that would
because
help.
the blocking was poor. It's only like what we just talked about was in the few examples where the blocking was good, he didn't really take advantage of it. Now maybe it's hard for him to know what to trust and what not to when it's so poor outside of it.
It was
It's
inconsistent.
give and take.
And
But
they just lost up front, didn't they? Billings had a few nice plays where I think he'd probably studied how Austin Blythe executes down blocks, and he sort of beat him across his face, and they had a good stunt going on. I thought Blythe had two bad plays, but then the rest of the interior struggled, the exterior struggled. Crosby set edges great against Abe Lucas.
yeah,
Like, um,
they need to trade for him, man. I don't care. They need to trade
okay, trade for Crosby. Right, there we
trade for
go.
Rick Crosby.
Anything else, Drift, on the offense?
No, I think they just need to stay the course. And I mean, I really thought there were a lot of cool schematic things this game. Like a little bit more gun running again. Like they're hiding tendency everywhere. They still passed a lot, So they're being chameleon like formationally, which is cool because
Yes,
then that defenses can't track down tendencies on them. So yeah,
always useful.
yeah,
Right. So, Drift, next up is the Rams, and Ty and I have already previewed their injury situation and the fact they're missing Matt Stafford, Wolford, Allen Robinson, your guy, Cooper Cup,
Of a past guy.
and
I've
Aaron
moved on.
Donald. Oh, you moved on, huh? Well, after that didn't pan out, you're just like, no,
He
no.
was more. He was more when he was good. It was more of a Russ
No,
specific thing.
notice, listener, how cutthroat Griff is. Very, very quick to move on.
Hmm.
It's always at the back of my mind.
Yeah. Watch yourself, Maddie.
Mm.
Offense, defense wise, they are facing a defense they've faced quite a few times this year. They're facing their own defense, really.
With a bit more too high and a bit more four dry.
Yeah, and much less man. Like they are almost completely zone.
Mm.
So I
Pete
don't think.
Carroll had an interesting. Sorry, Pete Carroll
No,
had an
go ahead.
interesting statistic that they've given up the least amount of explosives in the run and pass game.
Really,
Yeah, which is kind of crazy. Which is a run of 12 yards or more and a pass of 16 yards or more.
that's bizarre because I came across a stat that like contradicts that a little bit.
Oh,
It was contextual. It was specific to something, and
mm,
I
I
think it
love.
was like something that was really damning of Bobby Wagner, even though his PFF grade is like the
Oh,
best linebacker in the league.
oh
But
dear.
it's like the number of explosives on balls caught between like 0 and 15 yards over the middle of the field. Now that does not necessarily mean that's on Bobby Wagner because it depends
No.
totally on the call, the formation, but that is his general
Well,
area.
to me,
And
just to
also
confirm my
explosives on
priors.
runs in between the B gaps. So B gaps and A gaps. Very
Oh,
specific. But someone sent that to me and I was like,
mm,
"Oh, wow." And they said Bobby has not been good on tape because they watch the Rams a lot despite
yeah.
his grade being very
Right.
high.
So they were digging for that. To me, that confirms also like more. It's more about the calls they're calling to keep Bobby from having to run vertical with someone. Like he is in the low hole or
Yeah,
pushing
from what
lateral
I've
on
seen,
every coverage play.
they don't ask him to do anything.
No, no, he's just sort of out there. Which I mean, he's good at diagnosing runs and
Right.
he's a bit slow. He's good at shedding blocks still. Like he's good at feeling and the play, and he's obviously got a wealth of experience and quality football behind him. But
Team leader, all that.
he doesn't really do anything.
Yeah. I
He'll
mean, it's
probably have a
very
great game and force like 5 fumbles, but
yeah.
I've said this,
Yeah.
but
So because they don't play a lot of man, I think they'll just keep DK on the left side. Or because Ramsey's a left side corner. Or
Ramsey,
but he's also having a bit of a down year. He's busting a lot of zone assignments.
he is.
Um, because he's trying to make plays that he shouldn't be trying to make, like just
They're
play
pressing.
call. Yeah. So I wonder how they handle that. Half quarter, there will be a one-on-one on the weak side because they play so much half quarter, and then they spin the cover three. So weak cover three. So I wonder if I don't know. I'm curious to see what they throw out there. I don't feel like they'll have to use a lot of pistol for like coverage identification purposes. I feel like they know what they're going to be in. It'll
Right.
just be can you beat it? So
Now, yeah,
I
yeah,
suppose we'll see a lot more under center this game with a heavy dose of under center runs,
that would make
um,
sense.
and then by virtue of that, a lot of boot play action as well. Um, what they do in empty will be interesting,
Hmm.
but
I look forward to seeing Gino pass over the intermediate against them. Now, on the other side of the ball, obviously they're very injury depleted. I imagine now we were asked a question actually by Dan Thompson about why Devontae Adams was really open on a certain play, and it was the same thing which came up in the preseason, and I was a bit confused by because it's where a team runs a bootleg to the cover four side of half quarter quarter or quarter quarter half. And so what happens is the cover four corner gets run off, the cover four safety kind of brackets that vertical route, and then two routes come from across from the cover two side, and the deep half safety doesn't run with it, and the cloud corner doesn't run with it. And so then you're asking your nickel, your vertical hook player, and your middle linebacker to flow outside with the run fake and then try and get back across with the pass and the race routes coming back across the middle. And with Bryce Perkins under center, I imagine that's what McVay will try and get into, that kind of deal as well. Now, the way Seattle plays it is they ask, I mean, in an ideal world, the linebacker takes the shallower crosser route, and then the nickel finds the deeper one. But Bryant and Barton both went for the same one in that Adams example, which, if you want to know when that was in the game, I will post it in the description of this YouTube video. But or in the comments, I'll post it in the comments. But I think that's what McVay will go for. This he'll go for his sort of, get Perkins moving out in the pocket, run your bootleg stuff, and Griff.
I agree. 24-10 Seahawks.
Well, you didn't have any knowledge of what the over under is, what the spread is. You're crazy. You've gone in blind. Do you usually go in blind? You're a madman. What are you doing here?
Because I'm mad.
I think the over under is 40.5, and the Seahawks are plus 5-point favorites.
I would take the over.
I think the Seahawks will win 31-7.
That's a new one. I'm trying to find the stat, man. Oh well.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in live. Please like the video. Please comment if you haven't already. We see you in the comment section. What's up, everybody? Thank you for joining. And please do review the podcast. 5-star reviews. Follow Griffin at CMikeSpinMove. Follow me at Matty F. Brown. We appreciate you, and we'll be back on Sunday with hopefully a reaction to the Seahawks winning again, because they've lost 3 in a row now, and I'm sick of it. And they need to start winning if they want to make the playoffs, and they've got to beat the Rams. Surely this time they can beat the Rams. Please. Goodbye.
Goodbye.